Oh, I'm going to hit. So we are now recording. And I guess if you could just start by sharing with me, I know that you focus on K-12 education in your position as the state superintendent. But nonetheless, if you could just share your thoughts on what happened at MSU on Monday night.
Well, it's a complete tragedy, and it's in a series of tragedies that we've had in this country over a period of decades. In pre-K 12 education, this goes from Columbine up. And yesterday was the fifth anniversary of the tragedy in Parkland, Florida. But we've had a series of these: Columbine, Edinboro, Paducah, Parkland, Newtown, Oxford, 14 months ago, almost 15 months ago. And it's time for it to stop. It's long past time that our state legislature pass meaningful, common sense gun safety reform.
So I'm sure you're familiar, the state legislature put together a committee and took a look at ways to try and make school safer. And there's been a lot of talk about it, especially in the last couple of days. A lot of it has to do with mental health. A lot of it has to do with safety planning. I don't think there's one word in there about guns. What are your opinions as far as those recommendations that are being bounced about and whether you think that's enough?
Well, we most assuredly have to deal with children's mental health. We are catching up in this state relative to children's mental health. 5 years ago, there was nothing in the State School Aid Act for children's mental health. Now there's $361 million in the State School Aid Act for children's mental health, and we're working to build out a comprehensive children's mental health system. But in addition to that, we need meaningful, common sense gun safety reform in the state. They're not mutually exclusive. They go hand in glove. They're both necessary.
Do you think, and again, those recommendations, it seems to me puts the burden on the school to help protect kids, come up with better planning, come up with more drills, but it doesn't seem to focus on kind of the prevention, right? The let's not give people guns so they can't go shoot people in the first place. Is that more of what you'd like to see?
Well, we've advocated for months, the State Board of Education, the Department of Education, that we need to require background checks on all sales, including sales at gun shows and other private sales, that we need to enact a child access prevention law that holds gun owners accountable for the safe storage of firearms, so you can't have happen, or you reduce the likelihood that what happened in Oxford happens in Oxford. Preventing sales of firearms to people who have been reported to law enforcement as dangerous to themselves and others. Requiring a waiting period of at least 3 days after a gun purchase before a gun can be taken home. Imposing criminal penalties or fines for those who buy firearms for another person. Requiring a person to be at least 21 to purchase an assault-style weapon. And then finally, establishing extreme risk protection orders through the court for people who are particularly dangerous to either themselves or others. These are all necessary elements to keep us safe. We absolutely need to continue to improve on our mental health supports, not simply in pre-K 12, but at the university level and in the community. But in addition to that, we need to work on gun safety.
I see that you're Dr. Rice, and so you've got a lot of background in education in the area of education. I'm wondering if pre-Columbine, you ever thought you'd be in a position where you would, hold a high-ranking education post and yet have to focus part of your agenda on gun safety.
Well, I started in public schools in the 80s, and I don't recall a school shooting at the time. I recall shootings on the street associated with the gun trade, with the drug trade, but I do not recall a shooting in public schools until Columbine in 1999, and we're coming up to what I believe is the 23rd anniversary of Columbine's. We've had almost a quarter of a century of these horrific acts. And I might add that what is particularly startling to those of us, or a couple of things that are particularly startling. One, the greater prevalence in the United States than in others, because the greater permissiveness around guns in the United States relative to other countries. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is that traditionally in our country, even though there were more shootings than in other industrialized nations, there were particular institutions that appeared to be more sanctuary-like than others. And I'm talking about, for example, pre-K-12 schools. I'm also talking about faith-based institutions. But in the last quarter of a century, from Columbine on, there's been a chipping away of those sanctuaries. And though I continue to believe that schools and faith-based institutions are safer than broader communities, that cold comfort to those who have lost loved ones associated with these tragedies. And again, it's time for our state legislature to act. It well past time.
Let me, that was one of my two next questions. Are you hopeful now that given a Democratic legislature and the Democratic governor, which we had, that we might now be in a space where some of the reform that you're calling for is actually possible?
I believe strongly that this legislative leadership and Governor Whitmer are going to work together to drive this to some improvement. I believe that we're going to get some common sense gun reform out of this time. But I do believe that the longer that we wait, the less likely that will take place. In the wake of Oxford, 14 and a half months ago, there were promises made about hearings and putting gun safety legislation up for a vote. Those promises were not kept. They need to be kept this time. We need to have not only hearings on this, but prompt action, prompt votes, and positive votes on these common sense gun safety reforms.
Are you looking forward to a day where you can get back to reading, writing, and arithmetic?
I think schools have become more complicated in the last 4 decades. I think our communities, our societies have become more complicated. I think we have a responsibility to take care of one another better than perhaps we did a decade ago, decade and a half ago, 2 decades ago. And so I think that complexity is going to manifest itself in schools as well as outside of schools. We have to address that complexity with some tougher standards around gun ownership, gun usage, particularly around those who are either younger, number one, or who have shown themselves to be dangerous to self or others.
Is there anything I'm missing or anything you'd like to add?
Nope, I think you've got it. You've got one of the cooler names on earth.
It was tough in grade school, but it's kind of come into its own now. I always said I should have been a radio DJ instead of a TV guy.
Can I suggest this? I know something about tough in grade school.
Yeah.
Because you were teased about what sort of jam, and I was teased about the San Francisco treat and rice-a-roni and all sorts of other stupid stuff. So I get it. All I can say is that if it doesn't kill you when you're young, it makes you stronger.
Absolutely.
When you're older.
For sure. And
no, I think it's a totally cool name.
Yeah.
And it's one of those names that can be noun and verb.
Exactly. I tell people that all the time. Yes.
Yeah, and how cool is that? I mean, there's no such thing as to rice somebody.
I guess not.
But you can certainly jam somebody.
Absolutely. Or jam with somebody.
That's right. Jam with somebody. Exactly right.
Yeah.
If I can help out additionally, let me know. The issue is important to us. It's a sadness that people would would feel unnerved in ordinary public spaces.
Yeah.
You know, when you look at an elementary school, a middle school, a high school, a university. I mean, these kids, they were doing nothing. They were doing nothing to put themselves in harm's way, precisely nothing. They were just living. And it's a profound sadness that we can't do better to prevent particular people. I'm not talking about all people, but particular people from owning guns.
Or just locking them, you know, it doesn't violate your Second Amendment right to say if you're a parent and you have a gun, you need to put it in a lockbox.
That's exactly
you can
right.
still have your
That's
gun,
exactly
you can
right.
take it out and shoot it whenever you want, but it might stop your kid from getting it, you know?
That's right. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
I wish you well. Thank you very much. Good to talk with you.
All right, you too. Thanks again. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you, Marty.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you. See you, Jim.